Hello! Happy Friday! Got that messy hair tied back. Let's just untie that. Yeah. There, I got the messy hair untied. How is everybody doing? I see Farm Mouse in the chat. I don't see anybody else yet. How's Farm Mouse doing then? All by your lonesome. Me too. Oh dear. Oh. Well, that's on record. That is that is just about the worst typo. Feel like it's like you were trying to type out duck and the autocorrect went in the wrong direction. Gives thirsty a meaning. Nice. Wow. That's a way to start the stream. Oh. That's terrible. Oh boy. Do I want to start the recording over? No, I think I'll leave it. Looks like BBAB is streaming right now, as is Bear. So I'm not expecting them to show up anytime soon. Though sometimes BBAB raids over here. No sign of any sharkies yet. Oh, never mind. There they are. I was just saying. Oh, look at that. Farmhouse's typo has scrolled off the screen. Yeah. How's it going, Sharkies? I don't know whether you caught anything from the beginning there. You missed quite the Freudian slip. We just got back not long ago from taking the pupper out for a stroll, an afternoon stroll. We're both a bit thirsty as a result. But it's okay, we've got drinks. How's the rest of your week been? Busy, but regular busy. I guess that's good. We've got a house showing tomorrow. Somebody's coming to look at the place, but it's not until late afternoon, so we've got lots of time to clean and get out of here. So we're going to clean up the place and then go visit friends in Chilliwack. Yeah. Yeah, not much else has happened with us between Wednesday and today. So, we're on to a new part. Thulmargos. Try and uncover the page from my hand. Look at that map. So nice. Although it is sadly lacking in bogs, isn't it? There's a tarn, but no bogs. I mean, I guess they're there, but they're not labeled, so are they really there? North Tower River, South Tower River, Goska up there. Moors of Murgos. I feel like they're not very creative with their naming, are they? Thulmargos, Rakthul, Rakgoska, and then you've got Wasteland of Murgos and Moors of Murgos. Get out of here, Buggin. Some little fruit fly type things lying around. Could assume the topographical symbols. It's not the same. It's no bogs. And we need to refill this. Yeah. No, and I mean the Rakthul and Rakgoska, that's not necessarily... I just assume that Rak means something. But it's mostly more the Wasteland of Murgos and Moors of Murgos that... when there aren't really that many labeled features in their landscape here. And the whole country is named Thulmargos. I just noticed that I read Thulmargos as Murgos, but the wasteland and moors I read as Murgos. As in, like, belonging to the Murgos. Probably one of those is wrong. Probably I should... Murgos is quite the brand name for them. Yeah. Yeah, they really want to drive that home for people. Their real goal is to spread the brand. So, we are going to be down one princess in this part of the book. It's going to be a little sad. Is anybody going to miss Princess Sinedra? Other than Garion? I don't have the bingo cam set up right now, so I'm just going to leave that off for today. I'll just hold up the bingo sheet if I need to fill anything in. If anyone wants a refresher. We are missing Garion gets cocky, head injury. I feel like head injury is slightly more likely now that they're heading into hostile territory. We're missing Garion eavesdrops. I don't know about that one. Belgrath or Polgara are snobbish about magic. Hetar in Murgo mode. Sadly, for the time being, we're unlikely to get that one. Pyrodernic. That one's a wild card, I think. That could go either way. We might get that one. Belgrath being a dirty old man. I don't think that one's likely to come up in Thulmargos. Nonsense argument. Again, Sinedra's left the party, so I don't know. Garion gets kidnapped. Of course, we've got our angst space, which... yeah. Garion gets kidnapped. Could happen, could happen. Garion is uncomfortable with world leaders. It's almost better if that one doesn't come up, I think. Garion does something unexpected. That one is very likely, I think. Garion must stay in an uncomfortable situation. I don't think that one... It's going to be an uncomfortable situation, but not in the way that one implies. Disbelief in magic, or disbelief in Belgrath or Polgara. Mandoralin being very confident, that one could definitely happen. And Silk being a D&D rogue, that one could also definitely happen. So I still think that the O column is the most likely. Pyrodernic plus Silk being a D&D rogue, I think are probably our most likely combination. But Garion getting cocky plus a head injury. Garion getting cocky and then a head injury could happen like that. That's true, Sharkies, yeah. And I would definitely count that if it came up. Pouring in with the brew crew. Are we getting raided? Did I miss? Oh, I did. Books, Brews, and Brews. Raiding with a party of 9. Party of 9 for BBAB. Hey, welcome, everyone. I was just about to get started here with our book we're reading. Who we got here? Flying Shep. Kebo 3. Kebo? The raid emoji, or the emote, that's nice. And there's BBAB. How's it going? How's everyone doing tonight? Ready for the weekend? You liking my hair? Yeah, it was tied back, and then I was like, no, this won't do. I've got to let it out. How's everyone doing? Thank you, BBAB. Yeah, we are just, we're reading Magician's Gambit by David Eddings. And we're just getting into part 4. Part 4. Thul Murgos. Which sounds like nonsense words, but it's the name of a nation, I suppose, a kingdom. Do I have this right way up? Yeah, I do. Here's the map. I know BBAB likes a good map. There we go. Bordering the Sea of the East. And our group are headed down here to Rak Kthol, in the wasteland of Murgos. And I believe they're probably going to be coming from up here somewhere. I'm pretty sure they're coming from the north. Yeah. Yeah, so why don't I get into it? I'm on chapter 19. In my copy, it is page 203, it looks like. So we are about 2/3 of the way through this book because it goes to page 305. So almost exactly 2/3 of the way through. One of the stray cats is trying to scale your door demanding food. Yeah, thank you for the plug, Farmhouse. Yeah, if you check out the same name, Sleet Reads on YouTube. We've read The Hobbit, we've read some Sir Terry Pratchett, we've read the previous 2 books to this one. 2 Terry Pratchett books, Guards and Weird Sisters, which are both really fun. Yeah, So I'm gonna read some book, and please stick around. Feel free to chat. Is the book series like Lord of the Rings? I mean, it's more recent than Lord of the Rings, but it is from the 80s. This book, I think, is from around 85. Nope, first edition, June 1983. So early 80s. Like Farmo says, there's 5 books total. So we've read 2 of them, and then there's another 2 that follow. But they're all a bit shorter than the individual books of Lord of the Rings. And then it's followed up almost immediately by another 5-book series called The Malorian. As Farmos is saying. I point this way because for me I've got the chat over here, but it's also on screen here. Yeah, so our adventuring party has been visiting the relatively peaceful underground cavernous land of the Ulgos. I think my dishwasher is about to start singing at us. Maybe. And we are now venturing into enemy territory in search of the Orb of Aldur, which was stolen from the Kingdoms of the West. Deanna Cross, Songstress D. Do I have a chalice collection? So that actually used to be kind of a hobby shelf, but we're kind of in the process of trying to sell this house. So the dino here is going to go into hiding after I'm done the stream tonight, and I've got a viewing tomorrow. So these are just kind of display. Yeah, I guess that one kind of looks like a chalice. This one right here, definitely. And some things I would probably describe more like champagne flutes, and there's some wine glasses and martini glasses and whatever this fancy dish looking thing is. But yeah, it's more for house viewings than what I would normally display there. Oh, since we got all these new people, I kind of feel like I need to summon the puppy. I think that's sort of an important thing to do. He's a bigger draw for the stream than I am. So I'll just reach into this bag of treats here. Oh, here, click, clack, clack. Didn't even need to call his name. This is Binnabic. You can see his picture up here as well. Look at that accuracy. Hey, puppy. Whoa, you dropped it. Or I dropped it. One of us dropped it. Oh, now it's got hair on it. 5-second rule. It's your hair anyways. Get lost, you. There. Look at this pup. What a cute pup. What a cute puppy. His name is Binnakegabinik. Or Binnabic. Or just Bin. Okay, that's it. Oh, no. Did you get... You need to sneeze? Tilt the camera down so you can see him. I'll just get out of the way. Oh, there he goes. Look at that guy. What a good guy. Hey, Ben, you good boy? I don't have any treats, so you have no interest in me? Is that what's happening here? Alright, fine, be that way. Oh, he's got an itch. Alright, we don't need to see that, Ben. Jeez. Come on, this is a family-friendly stream. And he's off. Oh, let me readjust the camera. Yeah, that's been... Alright, I'm going to read some book. Everybody ready? Well, too bad. I'm doing it anyways. Chapter 19. They had been in darkness for days. The single dim light Relg carried could only provide a point of reference, something to follow. The darkness pressed against Garion's face, and he stumbled along the uneven floor with one hand thrust out in front of him to keep himself from banging his head into unseen rocks. So, if you can't tell, our group of our adventuring party are underground in some tunnels right now. They're being led by Relg, who is who lives down here in the caverns of Ulgo. And so Relg is very accustomed to the dark, can see in the dark. And he's using a mix of crushed up rocks that when mixed together start to glow a little bit to lead them through some caves that I believe come out somewhere in Algaria. And then from there they're heading to Thullish. They recently stopped by to recruit Relg specifically because he is good in caves, and they're going to need to sneak through some caves in Thullish in order to achieve their objective. It was not only the musty-smelling darkness, however. The musty-smelling darkness. Yeah, the darkness itself is what smells, huh? He could sense the oppressive weight of the mountains above him and on all sides. The stone seemed to push in on him. He was closed in, sealed up in miles of solid rock. He fought continually with the faint, fluttering edges of panic, and he often clenched his teeth to keep from screaming. There seemed to be no purpose to the twisting, turning route Relg followed. At the branching of passageways, his choices seemed random, but he always moved with steady confidence through the dark, murmuring caves, where the memory of sounds whispered in the dank air, voices out of the past echoing endlessly, whispering, whispering. Relg's air of confidence as he led them was the only thing that kept Garion from giving in to unreasoning panic. At one point, the zealot stopped. "What's wrong?" Silk asked sharply, his voice carrying that same faint edge of panic that Garion felt gnawing at his own awareness. "I have to cover my eyes here," Relg replied. He was wearing a peculiarly fashioned shirt of leaf mail, a strange garment formed of overlapping metal scales, belted at the waist, and with a snug-fitting hood that left only his face exposed. From his belt hung a heavy, hook-pointed knife, a weapon that made Garion cold just to look at it. He drew a piece of cloth out from under his mail shirt and carefully tied it over his face. "Why are you doing that?" Dernick asked him. "There's a vein of quartz in the cavern just ahead," Relg told him. "It reflects sunlight down from the outside. The light is very bright." "How can you tell which way to go if you're blindfolded?" Silk protested. "The cloth isn't that thick. I can see through it well enough. Let's go." They rounded a corner in the gallery they were following, and Garion saw a light ahead. He resisted an impulse to run toward it. They moved on, the hooves of the horses Hetar was leading clattering on the stone floor. "You missed the pup. I could summon him again. I could summon the dog. He would appreciate more treats." Look at that. Right on cue. Don't even need to say his name. Yeah, you get extra treats courtesy of Books, Brews, and Booze. Say thank you. Say thank you to BBAB. Oh, Casente. Little sneeze. Big shake. Glance over the shoulder, just in case there's any extra treats. Hey, Obama's third nipple followed the channel. Thank you. Thanks for the follow. Um, as I mentioned before, well, and as you can see, we're about 2/3 of the way through this book. And usually when we finish a book, we'll do a little stream where we vote on what to read next. So I'll try to let people know ahead of time when that's coming up. And then if you want some input, usually I'll have a selection to choose from because I'd like to pick from something I've read before just so I kind of know the content ahead of time. But such a sweetheart. Yeah, he is. I think he's a little sleepy. We got back from a walk not too long ago. Yep, definitely going to need a refill soon. Alright, let's see. They moved on, the hooves of the horses Hatar was leading clattering on the stone floor. The lighted cavern was huge, and it was filled with a glittering crystal light. A gleaming band of quartz angled across the ceiling, illuminating the cavern with a blazing radiance. Great points of stone hung like icicles from the ceiling, and other points rose from the floor to meet them. Stalactites, stalagmites. Stalactite has a C in it, stalactite for ceiling, and stalagmite has a G in it for ground. That's how I remember. Lighted, not lit. Eddings getting paid by the letter. Lighted. The lighted cavern was huge, and it was filled with a glittering crystal. And also, it was lighted and filled with a glittering crystal light. That sentence is a little awkward. A lighted cavern. That part I wouldn't have particularly noticed. For me, it was more standing out that he mentioned the light twice in one sentence. But I guess lighted is a little odd, isn't it? It's not the weirdest, is it? Is that super weird? In the center of the cavern, another underground lake stretched, its surface rippled by a tiny waterfall trickling down into its upper end with an endless tinkling sound that echoed in the cave like a little silver bell and joined harmoniously with the faint, remembered sigh of the singing of the Ulgos miles behind. Garion's eyes were dazzled by color that seemed to be everywhere. The prisms in the crystalline quartz twisted the light, breaking it into colored fragments and filling the cave with the multi-hued light of the rainbow. Garion found himself quite suddenly wishing that he could show the dazzling cave to Sinedra, and the thought puzzled him. Well, that's new, isn't it? I guess he hasn't really been away from her since she joined the party. You do tend to, you miss people once they're gone. Hurry, Relg urged them, holding one hand across his brow as if to further shade his already veiled eyes. Why not stop here? Barak suggested. We need some rest, and this looks like a good place. It's the worst place in all the caves, Relg told him. Hurry! Maybe you like the dark, Barak said, but the rest of us aren't that fond of it. He looked around at the cave. Protect your eyes, you fool, Relg snapped. I don't care for your tone, friend. You'll be blind once we get past this place if you don't. It's taken your eyes 2 days to get used to the dark. You'll lose all of that if you stay here too long. Barak stared hard at the Ulgo for a moment. Then he grunted and nodded shortly.
Sorry,
he said.
I didn't understand.
He reached out to put his hand on Relg's shoulder in apology.
Don't touch me!
Relg cried, shrinking away from the big hand.
What's the matter?
Just don't touch me! Not ever!
Relg hurried on ahead.
What's the matter with him?
Barak demanded.
He doesn't want you to defile him,
Belgarath explained.
Defile him? Defile him? He's very concerned about his personal purity. The way he sees it, any kind of touch can soil him. Soil? He's as dirty as a pig in a wallow. It's a different kind of dirt. Let's move on.
Barak strode along behind the rest of them, grumbling and sputtering in outrage. They moved into another dark passageway, and Garion looked longingly back over his shoulder at the fading light from the glowing cavern behind. Then they rounded a corner, and the light was gone. It's a different kind of dirt. There was no way to keep track of time in the murmuring darkness. They stumbled on, pausing now and then to eat or to rest, though Garion's sleep was filled with nightmares about mountains crushing in on him. He had almost given up all hope of ever seeing the sky again, when the first faint, cobweb touch of moving air brushed his cheek. It had been, as closely as he could judge, 5 days since they had left the last dimly lighted gallery of the Ulgos behind and plunged into this eternal night. At first he thought the faint hint of warmer air might only be his imagination. But then he caught the scent of trees and grass in the musty air of the cave, and he knew that somewhere ahead there lay an opening, a way out. Wow, that's quite the selection. Oh boy. The touch of warmer outside air grew stronger, and the smell of grass began to fill the passageway along which they crept. The floor began to slope upward, and imperceptibly it grew less dark. There's more. Why does that feel like a threat? Oh wow, yep, there are more. Not how I, bloop. We also got green, and green vomiting. I don't know about this one right here. I don't think that one belongs, and I don't want an argument as to why it does. Is one of those Garfield? What? Okay, and that one's just a dog. That's a dog. Yeah. Parmos notices it too. A laughing cat. Pooh Field. Oh boy, wow. Yeah, I guess I could see the name of some of these. I see. The one is called Toilet Puppy. And Toilet Boppo's Cat. Pooh Field, also known as Septic. Nice. toilet after dark? So a weird person with a dog. I don't know who that is, so I'll just take your word for it. Please don't be upset with me for not knowing who that is. Okay. Ahem. The floor began to slope upward, and imperceptibly, it grew less dark. It seemed somehow that they moved up out of endless night toward the light of the first morning in the history of the world. The horses, plodding along at the rear, had also caught the scent of fresh air, and their pace quickened. Relg, however, moved slower, and then slower still. Finally, he stopped altogether. The faint metallic rustling of his leaf mail shirt spoke loudly for him. Relg was trembling, bracing himself for what lay ahead. Your streamer friend. Oh, made a nice pumpkin for you. So you see, normal. He bound his veil across his face again, mumbling something over and over in the snarling language of the Ulgos, fervent, almost pleading. Once his eyes were covered, he moved on again, reluctantly, his feet almost dragging. I don't mind the derailing. But yes, that is a cute pumpkin. And I'm like slightly apprehensive that you're going to reveal that the pumpkin is also poo or something like that. No, it's just a cute pumpkin. Then there was golden light ahead. The mouth of the passageway was a jagged, irregular opening, with a stiff tangle of limbs sharply outlined in front of it. With a sudden clatter of little hooves, the colt, ignoring Hatar's sharp command, bolted for the opening and plunged out into the light. Belgarath scratched at his whiskers, squinting after the little animal. Belgarath scratched at his whiskers. Definitely needs to go on one of the bingo sheets. Squinting after the little animal.
Maybe you'd better take him and his mother with you when we separate,
he said to Hatar.
He seems to have a little trouble taking things seriously, and Cthul Mergos is a very serious place.
Hatar nodded gravely. Gravely, but not grimly.
I can't,
Relg blurted suddenly, turning his back to the light and pressing himself against the rock wall of the passageway.
I can't do it.
Of course you can, Aunt Pole said comfortingly to him. We'll go out slowly so you can get used to it a little at a time.
Don't touch me,
Relg replied almost absently.
That's going to get very tiresome,
Barak growled. Garion and the rest of them pushed ahead eagerly, their hunger for light pulling at them. They shoved their way roughly through the tangle of bushes at the mouth of the cave, and, blinking and shading their eyes, they emerged into the sunlight. The light at first stabbed Garion's eyes painfully, but after a few moments he found that he could see again. The partially concealed entrance to the caves was near the midpoint of a rocky hillside. Behind them, the snow-covered mountains of Ulgo glittered in the morning sun, outlined against the deep blue sky, and a vast plain spread before them like a sea. The tall grass was golden with autumn, and the morning breeze touched it into long, undulating waves. The plane reached to the horizon, and Garion felt as if he had just awakened from a nightmare. Just inside the mouth of the cave behind them, Relg knelt with his back to the light, praying and beating at his shoulders and chest with his fists.
"Now what's he doing?"
Barak demanded. I keep getting this, flashing on my screen over here, and then the live stream flashes over here. Did it right as I was kind of saying that. I wonder, I'm going to change something here. Got an idea what it might be. Let's just quit that for now. Try that, see if that stops it from happening. Maybe, maybe not.
"Now what's he doing?"
Barak demanded.
"It's a kind of purification ritual,"
Belgarath explained.
"He's trying to purge himself of all unholiness and draw the essence of the caves into his soul. He thinks it may help to sustain him while he's outside." "How long's he going to be at it?" "About an hour, I'd imagine. It's a fairly complicated ritual."
Relg stopped praying long enough to bind a second veil across his face, on top of the first one. If he wraps any more cloth around his head, he's likely to smother, Silk observed. "I'd better get started," Hetar said, tightening the straps on his saddle. "Is there anything else you wanted me to tell Chohag?"
"Tell him to pass the word along to the others about what's happened so far," Belgarath answered. "Things are getting to the point where I'd like everybody to be more or less alert."
Hetar nodded.
"Do you know where you are?"
Barak asked him. Of course. The tall man looked out at the seemingly featureless plain before him.
"It's probably going to take us at least a month to get to Rak Thul and back," Belgarath advised. "If we get a chance, we'll light signal fires on top of the eastern escarpment before we start down. Tell Chohag how important it is for him to be waiting for us. We don't want Murgos blundering into Algaria. I'm not ready for a war just yet."
Barak's being a bit culturally insensitive. Are you surprised? I have to admit, if I saw somebody beating themselves while kneeling on the ground and chanting out loud in a language I didn't understand, I'd be biting my tongue, to avoid asking what was going on. Granted, Barak's been traveling with him for a while, so he's not exactly entirely uninformed, but it's not what I would consider usual behavior. You're reading Anne of Avonlea. This is Lind talked smack about those Yankees. Oh, those Yankees. Alright, let's see. So Belgarath is not ready for a war just yet. "We'll be there," Hetar replied, swinging up into his saddle. "Be careful in Cthul Murgos." He turned his horse and started down the hill toward the plain, with the mare and the colt tagging along behind him. The colt stopped once to look back at Garion, gave a forlorn little whinny, then turned to follow his mother. Barak shook his head somberly.
I'm going to miss Hatar,
he rumbled. Thul Murgos wouldn't be a good place for Hatar, Silk pointed out. We'd have to put a leash on him.
I know that,
Barak sighed.
But I'll miss him all the same.
Which direction do we take? Mandaralin asked, squinting out at the grassland. Belgarath pointed to the southeast.
That way. We'll cross the upper end of the vale to the escarpment, and then go through the southern tip of Mishrak Ak Thul. The Thulls don't put out patrols as regularly as the Murgos do.
Thulls don't do much of anything unless they have to, Silk noted. They're too preoccupied with trying to avoid Grolims. When do we start? Dernick asked. Have we had an explanation as to why Thulls avoid Grolims? I don't think we have yet, have we? No. Later.
As soon as Relg finishes his prayers,
Belgarath replied.
We'll have time for breakfast then,
Barak said dryly. Mark rides. Eddings, yes. It is from the Belgariad. Book 3 of the Belgariad. Welcome, Mark rides. Yeah, we are on book 3 and we're about 2/3 of the way through. There are a few people in here that have not read it before. I've read this series many times. I haven't read the Malorian quite so often. And then the 2 books that follow that, I think I've only actually read once. Maybe after we're done this, I don't know. I don't know whether we're going to actually go through the Malorian. You know, we'll see how everyone feels once we finish this series. But if we don't end up doing it on stream, I may just have to do it myself. They rode all that day across the flat grassland of southern Algaria, beneath the deep blue autumn sky. Relg, wearing an old hooded tunic of Dernick's over his mail shirt, rode badly, with his legs sticking out stiffly. He seemed to be concentrating more on keeping his face down than on watching where he was going. Barak watched sourly, with disapproval written plainly on his face.
I'm not trying to tell you your business, Belgarath,
he said after several hours.
But that one's going to be trouble before we're finished with this.
The light hurts his eyes, Barak, Aunt Pole told the big man. And he's not used to riding. Don't be so quick to criticize. Barak clamped his mouth shut, his expression still disparaging. It looks like the flickering thing is still happening. There it goes. Weird. I wonder what's causing that. At least we'll be able to count on his staying sober, Aunt Pole observed primly, which is more than I can say about some members of this little group. Barak coughed uncomfortably. They set up for the night on the treeless bank of a meandering stream. Once the sun had gone down, Relg seemed less apprehensive, though he made an obvious point of not looking directly at the driftwood fire. Then he looked up and saw the first stars in the evening sky. He gaped at them in horror, his unveiled face breaking out in a glistening sweat. He covered his head with his arms and collapsed face down on the earth with a strangled cry. "Relg!" Garion exclaimed, jumping to the stricken man's side and putting his hands on him without thinking.
Don't touch me!
Relg gasped automatically. Don't be stupid. What's wrong? Are you sick?
The sky,
Relg croaked in despair.
The sky! It terrifies me!
The sky? Garion was baffled. What's wrong with the sky? He looked up at the familiar stars.
There's no end to it,
Relg groaned.
It goes up forever.
Quite suddenly, Garion understood. Someone racing outside. In the caves, he had been afraid, unreasoningly afraid, because he had been closed in. Out here, under the open sky, Relg suffered from the same kind of blind terror. Garion realized with a kind of shock that quite probably Relg had never been outside the caves of Ulgo in his entire life. It's all right, he assured him comfortingly. The sky can't hurt you. It's just up there. Don't pay any attention to it.
I can't bear it.
Don't look at it.
I still know it's there. All that emptiness.
Garion looked helplessly at Aunt Pole. She made a quick gesture that told him to keep talking. It's not empty, he floundered. It's full of things. All kinds of things. Clouds, birds, sunlight, stars.
What?
Relg lifted his face up out of his hands.
What are those?
I'll come to this discussion about Ulgos and cooking in a moment. I'm just going to finish this bit. Clouds? Everyone knows what... Garion stopped. Obviously, Relg did not know what clouds were. He'd never seen a cloud in his life. Garion tried to rearrange his thoughts to take that into account. It was not going to be easy to explain. He took in a deep breath. All right, let's start with clouds then. It took a long time, and Garion was not really sure that Relg understood, or if he was simply clinging to the words to avoid thinking about the sky. After clouds, birds were a bit easier, although feathers were very hard to explain.
Ul spoke to you,
Relg interrupted Garion's description of wings.
He called you Belgarian. Is that your name?
Well, Garion replied uncomfortably. Not really. Actually, my name is Garion, but I think the other name is supposed to be mine too. Sometime later, I believe, when I'm older.
Ul knows all things,
Relg declared.
If he called you Belgarian, that's your true name. I will call you Belgarian.
I really wish you wouldn't.
My God rebuked me,
Relg groaned. His voice sunk into a kind of sick self-loathing.
I have failed him.
Garion couldn't quite follow that. Somehow, even in the midst of his panic, Relg had been suffering the horrors of a theological crisis. Relg's having a bad day. That sounds like... Okay. All right. For those who haven't seen it yet, we've got a bingo sheet. And our center square is angst. And it has apparently been decided that this qualifies as angst. I don't really want to fully circle it out, so I'm going to put a circle around the angst. got squares on here such as head injury and Garion gets kidnapped. Nonsense argument. Silk is a D&D rogue. Angst square! As I try to put the lid on upside down. Alright, that means that we could go down the N column if we got head injury and somebody not believing in magic. Angst didn't get us too much closer in any other direction, though. I still think Pyrodernic and Silk being a D&D rogue are probably our best bets. But the N column is definitely possible. Alright, let's see. Relg had been suffering the horrors of a theological crisis. He sat on the ground with his face turned away from the fire and his shoulders slumped in an attitude of absolute despair.
"I'm unworthy," he said,
his voice on the verge of a sob.
"When Ul spoke in the silence of my heart, I felt that I had been exalted above all other men, but now I am lower than dirt."
You lived in caves your whole life, haven't you always been lower? Anyways. In his anguish, he began to beat the sides of his head with his fists. "Stop that," Garion said sharply. "You'll hurt yourself. What's this all about?" Head injury. Now, let's not wish head injuries on people just to fill out our bingo card.
"Ul told me that I was to reveal the child to Ulgo. I took his words to mean that I had found special grace in his eyes."
What child are we talking about?
"The child! The new Gorim. It's Ul's way to guide and protect his people. When an old Gorim's work is done, Ul places a special mark upon the eyes of the child who is to succeed him. When Ul told me that I had been chosen to bring the child to Ulgo, I revealed his words to others, and they revered me and asked me to speak to them in the words of Ul. I saw sin and corruption all around me, and I denounced it, and the people listened to me. But the words were mine, not Ul's. In my pride, I presumed to speak for Ul. I ignored my own sin to accuse the sins of others."
Relg's voice was harsh with fanatic self-accusation.
"I am filth,"
he declared.
"an abomination. Ul should have raised his hand against me and destroyed me."
"That's forbidden," Garion told him without thinking. "Hey, I'm on Briar's back. Hey, welcome back. We're, 2/3 of the way through Magician's Gambit. Almost closer to 3/4 at this point. And, we're dealing with someone in the midst of a theological crisis. You've been hella busy? Hey, no worries. I know how that is. We've been dealing with a variety of things here. Pepper's sleep with his head next to my socks. Oh boy. And apparently Garion took the lesson of not being allowed to destroy anything to heart if he's responding this instinctively. "That's forbidden," Garion told him without thinking.
"Who has the power to forbid anything to Ul?"
I don't know. All I know is that unmaking is forbidden, even to the gods. It's the very first thing we learn. Stinky socks. Well, no, they're probably normal socks. Yes, they have been worn today, and I took them off because I was warm, but listen, apparently the puppy thinks they smell good, okay? Pupper really likes socks. Usually he likes socks because putting them on means we're going outside. We don't need to have a whole conversation about my socks and whether or not they smell, okay? Oh boy. Also, Firemouse, that's kind of a weird sentence with the heart there. For anyone that didn't understand that, you're just saying that Binabik likes feet. Kind of. Chat got weird here. The pupper likes socks because they mean walks, and because they smell like his people's feet better. It may be. Sharkies feels like we're all in a bit of a weird mood today. The chat has gone into some strange directions today, I gotta say. Yep, exactly. All right. Let me redo this bit.
Who has the power to forbid anything to Ul?
I don't know. All I know is that unmaking is forbidden, even to the gods. It's the very first thing we learn. Relg looked up sharply, and Garion knew instantly that he had made a dreadful mistake.
You know the secrets of the gods?
The fanatic demanded incredulously. Pupcam. I wish I had a Pupcam. I do have a second camera, but my whole setup is here, and currently Pup is way over in the other room, and I don't have any cables that stretch that far to go to the Pup. It would all sound less weird if we, yeah. It would make things a little more clear.
You know the secrets of the gods?
The fanatic demanded incredulously. The fact that they're gods doesn't have anything to do with it, Garion replied. The rule applies to everybody. Relg's eyes burned with a sudden hope. He drew himself up onto his knees and bowed forward until his face was in the dirt.
Forgive me my sins, he intoned.
What?
I have exalted myself when I was unworthy.
You made a mistake. That's all. Just don't do it anymore. Please get up, Relg.
I'm wicked and impure.
You?
I've had impure thoughts about women.
Oh, boy. Oh, here we go. Everybody, oh, geez. Oh, man, oh, geez, Relg. Garion flushed with embarrassment. I feel you, Garion. We all have those kinds of thoughts once in a while, he said with a nervous cough. Garion is suddenly promoted to priesthood. Yeah. We do have a square about Garion needing to stay in an uncomfortable situation. I think we need to give it a couple more moments before we fill that one in, though.
My thoughts are wicked, wicked,
Relg groaned with guilt.
I burn with them.
Let's at least finish this conversation before we fill in the square. I'm sure that Ul understands. Please get up, Relg. You don't have to do this.
I have prayed with my mouth when my mind and heart were not in my prayers.
I agree, Sharkies. Relg.
I have sought out hidden caves for the joy of finding them, rather than to consecrate them to Ul. I have thus defiled the gift given me by my god.
Please, Relg. Relg began to beat his head on the ground.
Once I found a cave where the echoes of Ul's voice lingered. I did not reveal it to others, but kept the sound of Ul's voice for myself.
Garion began to become alarmed. The fanatic, Relg, was working himself into a frenzy. It's gonna get worse, everyone.
Punish me, Belgarian,
Relg pleaded.
Lay a hard penance on me for my iniquity.
Garion's mind was very clear as he answered. He knew exactly what to say. I can't do that, Relg, he said gravely. I can't punish you, any more than I can forgive you. If you've done things you shouldn't have, that's between you and Ul. If you think you need to be punished, you'll have to do it yourself. I can't. I won't. Relg lifted his stricken face out of the dirt and stared at Garion. Then, with a strangled cry, he lurched to his feet and fled wailing into the darkness. Garion! Aunt Pole's voice rang with that familiar note. I didn't do anything, he protested almost automatically.
What did you say to him?
Belgarath demanded. He said that he'd committed all kinds of sins, Garion explained. He wanted me to punish him and forgive him.
So?
I couldn't do that, Grandfather.
What's so hard about it?
Garion stared at him.
All you had to do was lie to him a little. Is that so difficult?
Lie? About something like that? Garion was horrified at the thought.
I need him, Garion, and he can't function if he's incapacitated by some kind of religious hysteria. Use your head, boy.
I can't do it, Grandfather, Garion replied stubbornly. It's too important to him for me to cheat him about it. You'd better go find him, Father, Aunt Pole said. Belgarath scowled at Garion.
You and I aren't finished with this yet, boy,
he said, pointing an angry finger. Then, muttering irritably to himself, he went in search of Relg. With a cold certainty, Garion suddenly knew that the journey to Thulmergos was going to be very long and uncomfortable. Okay, bingo card. Oh no. It's funny that a zealot who thinks he's the greatest, once faced with the truth that he isn't, must now be the worst. Oh yeah, some similarities to Mandarellen. So I think that pretty well fulfills Garion must stay in an uncomfortable situation. Wow, that was... I remembered that part, but I didn't remember it as being as thoroughly awful as it is. Parmos is posting a picture of the pup. Let's see. Oh, Yeah, that's my sock he's got his head on. That's a little stormtrooper face. What a cute pup. Alright. Let's see. Did anything else here get filled out? I feel like we got a little close to Garion does something unexpected. I don't know if that counts or not. It doesn't feel as unexpected. This was just sort of a weird conversation. We didn't quite get into disbelief about magic. I think we also got close to that one, but there wasn't actually any disbelief there. I don't think Garion got cocky. Belgarath was a little snobbish, but it wasn't about magic. And I feel like this also borders on Belgarath being a dirty old man, but it's less him being a dirty old man and more him just not having morals. Yeah, what the Sharkies are saying. That whole conversation, just so awkward. Poor Garion. And Belgarath getting upset at him for not lying. You didn't lie to him. What's your problem? Oh boy. That, yeah. Wow. That was the end of chapter 19. So I think I'm just going to go straight into chapter 20. That section was pretty funny. All right. Chapter 20. Page 213. Though summer that year had lingered in the lowlands and on the plains of Algaria, autumn was brief. The blizzards and squalls they had encountered in the mountains above Maragor, and again among the peaks of Ulgo, had hinted that winter would be early and severe, and there was already a chill to the nights as they rode, day after day, across the open grassland toward the eastern escarpment. Belgarath had recovered from his momentary fit of anger over Garion's failure to deal with Relg's attack of guilt, but then, with inescapable logic, he had placed an enormous burden squarely on Garion's shoulders.
For some reason he trusts you,
the old man observed.
So, I'm going to leave him entirely in your hands. I don't care what you have to do, but keep him from flying apart again.
That's not fair. At first, Relg refused to respond to Garion's efforts to draw him out. But after a while, one of the waves of panic caused by the thought of the open sky above swept over the zealot, and he began to talk, haltingly at first, but then finally in a great rush. As Garion had feared, Relg's favorite topic was sin. Garion was amazed at the simple things that Relg considered sinful. I feel like I saw a list of something like this recently. Farmos knows what I'm talking about. Forgetting to pray before a meal, for example, was a major transgression. As the fanatic's gloomy catalogue of his faults expanded, Garion began to perceive that most of his sins were sins of thought rather than of action. The one matter that kept cropping up again and again was the question of lustful thoughts about women. To Garion's intense discomfort,
Relg insisted on describing these lustful thoughts extensively. Oh, Ben didn't like that. He got woken up by lustful thoughts. I'm sorry if this gets awkward, everyone. I don't want to be doing this either. Oh boy, is everybody ready for some really cringy sentences? Because they're coming. Here we go.
Women are not the same as we are, of course.
The Zealot. Starting out strong, Relg. Starting out real strong. The Zealot confided one afternoon as they rode together. I already hate it. Relg's beliefs are not my beliefs. Let's just have that disclaimer out there. The Zealot confided one afternoon as they rode together. Oh boy. Oh, this is gonna get bad.
Their minds and hearts are not drawn to holiness the way ours are, and they set out deliberately to tempt us with their bodies and draw us into sin.
This is awful. Why do you suppose that is? Garion asked carefully.
Their hearts are filled with lust,
Relg declared adamantly.
They take particular delight in tempting the righteous. I tell you truly, Belgarian, you would not believe the subtlety of the creatures.
Creatures? Ugh. Garion using all of his Counseling 101 classes.
You would not believe the subtlety of the creatures. I have seen the evidence of this wickedness in the soberest of matrons, the wives of some of my most devout followers. They're forever touching, brushing as if by accident, and they take great pains to allow the sleeves of their robes to slip up to brazenly to expose their rounded arms.
This is really difficult to read.
And the hems of their garments always seem to be hitching up to display their ankles.
Oh no! Their rounded arms! I'm sorry. Oh, I shouldn't put that on camera. Their ankles. Oh no, wrists. Right? Oh, shocking. How brazen. How subtle and brazen. Relg the Victorian Puritan. Not the ankles. If it bothers you, don't look, Garion suggested. Relg ignored that.
I have even considered banning them from my presence. But then I thought that it might be better if I kept my eyes on them so that I could protect my followers from their wickedness.
Ah, how virtuous.
I thought for a time that I should forbid marriage among my followers, but some of the older ones told me that I might lose the young if I did that. I still think it might not be a bad idea.
Wouldn't that sort of eliminate your followers altogether? Garion asked him. I mean, if you kept it up long enough. No marriage, no children. You get my point?
That's the part I haven't worked out yet,
Relg admitted. And what about the child? The new Gorim? If two people are supposed to get married so they can have a child, that particular special child, and you persuade them not to, Aren't you interfering with something that Ul wants to happen? Relg drew in a sharp breath as if he had not considered that. Then he groaned.
You see, even when I'm trying my very hardest, I always seem to stumble straight into sin. I'm cursed, Belgarian, cursed! Why did Ul choose me to reveal the child when I am so corrupt?
Garion quickly changed the subject, oh, thank God, to head off that line of thought. This is terrible. Poor Garion. Poor me. For 9 days they crossed the endless sea of grass toward the eastern escarpment. And for 9 days the others, with a callousness that hurt Garion to the quick, left him trapped in the company of the ranting zealot. He grew sulky and frequently cast reproachful glances at them. But they ignored him. Betrayed. I also feel like we've got some, real close to nonsense argument here, except that there hasn't really been a full argument. Near the eastern edge of the plain, they crested a long hill and stared for the first time at the immense wall of the eastern escarpment, a sheer basalt cliff. Basalt? I think it's basalt, right? Basalt? Basalt? Basalt. A sheer basalt cliff rising fully a mile above the rubble at its base and stretching off into the distance in either direction.
Impossible,
Barak stated flatly.
We'll never be able to climb that.
Basalt? Basalt cliff? Basalt? We won't have to, Silk told him confidently. I know a trail. We've got Silk as a D&D rogue, but we don't actually have Silk knowing the way, do we? Bit of Fry and Laurie. I have not seen that bit. I've seen some Fry and Laurie skits, but not a lot of them. I've never really sat down and watched many of them, but there definitely are some very funny bits. You'll send me that one, okay? I know a trail.
A secret trail, I suppose?
Not exactly a secret, Silk replied. I don't imagine too many people know about it, but it's right out in plain sight, if you know where to look. I had occasion to leave Mishrak Akthul in a hurry once, and I stumbled across it.
One gets the feeling that you've had occasion to leave just about every place in a hurry at one time or another.
Silk shrugged. Knowing when it's time to run is one of the most important things people in my profession ever learn. Will the river ahead not prove a barrier? Mandaralan asked, looking at the sparkling surface of the Aldor River lying between them and the grim black cliff. We've already filled that spot. I almost feel like that should have been the free space. He was running his fingertips lightly over his side, testing for tender spots. Manderallen, stop that, Aunt Pole told him. They'll never heal if you keep poking at them. Methinks, my lady, that they are nearly whole again, the knight replied. Only one still causes me any discomfort. Well, leave it alone.
There's a ford a few miles upstream, Belgarath said in answer to the question. The river's down at this time of year, so we won't have any difficulty crossing.
He started out again, leading them down the gradual slope toward the Aldur. They forded late that afternoon and pitched their tents on the far side. The next morning, they moved out to the foot of the escarpment. The trail's just a few miles south, Silk told them, leading the way along the looming black cliff. Do we have to go up along the face of it? Garion asked apprehensively, craning his neck to look up the towering wall. Silk shook his head. The trail's a stream bed. It cuts down through the cliff. It's a little steep and narrow, but it will get us safely to the top. Garion found that encouraging. The trail appeared to be little more than a crack in the stupendous cliff, and a trickle of water ran out of the opening to disappear into the jumble of rocky debris along the base of the escarpment.
Are you sure it goes all the way to the top?
Barak asked, eyeing the narrow chimney suspiciously. Trust me, Silk assured him.
Not if I can help it.
The trail was awful, steep and strewn with rock. At times it was so narrow that the pack horses had to be unloaded before they could make it through, and they had to be literally manhandled up over basalt boulders that had fractured into squares, almost like huge steps. I do appreciate a literal usage of the word literally. Barak and Silk banter. I was thinking that too. I was thinking it's been a while since we've had some proper Barak and Silk banter. It's good to get back into form. Over basalt boulders that had fractured into squares, almost like huge steps. The trickle of water running down the cut made everything slick and muddy. To make matters even worse, thin, high clouds swept in from the west, and a bitterly cold draft spilled down the narrow cut from the arid plains of Mishrak Thul, lying high above. See, it's being described as plains in Mishrak Thul again. But I feel like our map... Mishrak Thul. Oh, I guess they're sort of up here somewhere right now. Because that says Mishrak Thul up there, and they were coming in through there to avoid patrols. So they are further to the east than I expected. I mean, they're probably sort of central. They're probably like right around up here, I would guess. So, the arid plains of Mishrak Thul lying high above. It took them 2 days, and by the time they reached the top, a mile or so back from the brink of the escarpment, they were all exhausted.
I feel as if somebody's been beating me with a stick,
Barak groaned, sinking to the ground in the brushy gully at the top of the cut.
A very big, dirty stick.
They all sat on the ground among the prickly thorn bushes in the gully, recovering from the dreadful climb. I'll have a look around, Silk said after only a few moments. The small man had the body of an acrobat, supple, strong, and quick to restore itself. He crept up to the rim of the gully, ducking low under the thorn bushes and worming his way the last few feet on his stomach to peer carefully over the top. After several minutes, he gave a low whistle, and they saw him motion sharply for them to join him. Barak groaned again and stood up. Dernick, Mandaralin, and Garion also got stiffly to their feet.
See what he wants, Belgarath told them. I'm not ready to start moving around just yet.
You are a little bit on the elderly side, Belgarath. The four of them started up the slope, through the loose gravel, toward the spot where Silk lay, peering out from under a thorn bush, crawling the last few feet, as he had done.
What's the trouble?
Barak asked the little man as they came up beside him. Company, Silk replied shortly, pointing out over the rocky, arid plain, lying brown and dead under the flat gray sky. Well, there's a lovely picture, isn't there? A cloud of yellow dust, whipped low to the ground by the stiff, chill wind, gave evidence of riders. A patrol? Dernick asked in a hushed voice. I don't think so, Silk answered. Thulls aren't comfortable on horses. They usually patrol on foot. Garion peered out across the arid waste. Is that somebody out in front of them? He asked, pointing at a tiny, moving speck a half-mile or so in front of the riders. Ah, Silk said with a peculiar kind of sadness.
What is it, Silk?
Barak asked.
What is it?
Barak asked.
Don't keep secrets, Silk. I'm not in the mood for it.
They're Grolims, Silk explained. The one they're chasing is a Thull, trying to escape being sacrificed. It happens rather frequently. Should I'm fumbling names right now. I'm reading ahead to see who's talking, and then I'm mixing up where the name gets said. Should Belgarath be warned? Mandaralin suggested. It's probably not necessary, Silk replied. The Grolims around here are mostly low-ranking. I doubt any of them would have any skill at sorcery. I'll go tell him anyway, Dernick said. He slid back away from the edge of the gully, rose, and went back down to where the old man rested with Aunt Pole and Relg. As long as we stay out of sight, we'll probably be all right, Silk told them. It looks as if there are only 3 of them, and they're concentrating on the Thull. The running man had moved closer. He ran with his head down and his arms pumping at his sides.
What happens if he tries to hide here in the gully?
Barak asked. Silk shrugged. The Grolims will follow him.
We'd have to take steps at that point, wouldn't we?
Silk nodded with a wicked little smirk.
We could call him, I suppose.
Barak suggesting violence. Barak suggested, loosening his sword in its sheath. The same thought had just occurred to me. Dernick came back up the slope, his feet crunching in the gravel. Wolf says to keep an eye on them, he reported, but he says not to do anything unless they actually start into the gully. What a shame, Silk sighed regretfully. The running Thull was clearly visible now. He was a thick-bodied man in a rough tunic, belted at the waist. His hair was shaggy and mud-colored, and his face was contorted into an expression of brutish panic. He passed the place where they hid, perhaps 30 paces out on the flats, and Geryon could clearly hear his breath whistling in his throat as he pounded past. He was whimpering as he ran, an animal-like sound of absolute despair. "They almost never try to hide," Silk said in a soft voice tinged with pity. "All they do is run." He shook his head. "They'll overtake him soon," Manderalin observed. The pursuing Grolems wore black, hooded robes and polished steel masks.
"We'd better get down,"
Barak advised. They all ducked below the gully rim. A few moments later, the 3 horses galloped by, their hooves thudding on the hard earth. "They'll catch him in a few more minutes," Geryon said. "He's running right for the edge. He'll be trapped." "I don't think so," Silk replied somberly. A moment later, they heard a long, despairing shriek, fading horribly into the gulf below. "I more or less expected that," Silk said. Geryon's stomach wrenched at the thought of the dreadful height of the escarpment.
"They're coming back,"
Barak warned.
"Get down."
The 3 Grolems rode back along the edge of the gully. One of them said something Geryon could not quite hear, and the other 2 laughed. "The world might be a brighter place with 3 less Grolems in it," Manderalin suggested in a grim whisper. Grim. "Attractive thought," Silk agreed. "But Belgarath would probably disapprove. I suppose it's better to let them go. We wouldn't want anybody looking for them." Barak looked longingly after the 3 Grolems, then sighed with deep regret. "Let's go back down," Silk said. So, content warning, there may be some bloody bits in Thulmergos, just so everybody's aware. It's not a happy place. They all turned and crawled back down into the brushy gully. Belgarath looked up as they returned.
"Are they gone?"
"They're riding off," Silk told him.
"What was that cry?"
Relg asked. 3 Grolems chased the Thull off the edge of the escarpment," Silk replied.
"Why?"
"He'd been selected for a certain religious observance, and he didn't want to participate."
"He refused?"
Relg sounded shocked.
"He deserved his fate, then."
"I don't think you appreciate the nature of Grolem ceremonies, Relg," Silk said.
"One must submit to the will of one's god,"
Relg insisted. There was a sanctimonious note to his voice.
"Religious obligations are absolute."
Silk's eyes glittered as he looked at the Ulgo fanatic. "How much do you know about the Angarak religion, Relg?" he asked.
"I concern myself only with the religion of Ulgo."
"A man ought to know what he's talking about before he makes judgments." "Let it lie, Silk," Aunt Pol told him. "I don't think so, Polgara. Not this time. A few facts might be good for our devout friend here. He seems to lack perspective." Silk turned back to Relg. "The core of the Angarak religion is a ritual most men find repugnant. Thulls devote their entire lives to avoiding it. That's the central reality of Thullish life."
An abominable people.
Relg's denunciation was harsh. No, Thulls are stupid, even brutish, but they're hardly abominable. You see, Relg, the ritual we're talking about involves human sacrifice. Relg pulled the veil from his eyes to stare incredulously at the rat-faced little man. There's the singing dishwasher. That's a interesting bit of imagery there, isn't it? Relg literally pulling the veil from his eyes. Each year, 2,000 Thulls are sacrificed to Torak, Silk went on, his eyes boring into Relg's stunned face. The Grolims permit the substitution of slaves, so a Thull spends his whole life working in order to get enough money to buy a slave to take his place on the altar if he's unlucky enough to be chosen. But slaves die sometimes, or they escape. If a Thull without a slave is chosen, he usually tries to run. Then the Grolims chase him. They've had a lot of practice, so they're very good at it. I've never heard of a Thull actually getting away.
It's their duty to submit,
Relg maintained stubbornly, though he seemed a bit less sure of himself. How are they sacrificed? Dernick asked in a subdued voice. The Thull's willingness to hurl himself off the escarpment had obviously shaken him. It's a simple procedure, Silk replied, watching Relg closely. Two Grolims bend the Thull backward over the altar, and a third cuts his heart out. Then they burn the heart in a little fire. Torak isn't interested in the whole Thull. He only wants the heart. Relg flinched at that. They sacrifice women, too, Silk pressed, but women have a simpler means of escape. The Grolims won't sacrifice a pregnant woman. It confuses their count. So, Thullish women try to stay pregnant constantly. That explains why there are so many Thulls, and why Thullish women are notorious for their indiscriminate appetite.
Monstrous,
Relg gasped.
Death would be better than such vile corruption.
Death lasts for a long time, Relg, Silk said with a cold little smile. A little corruption can be forgotten rather quickly if you put your mind to it. That's particularly true if your life depends on it. Relg's face was troubled as he struggled with the blunt description of the horror of Thullish life.
You're a wicked man,
he accused Silk, though his voice lacked conviction. I know, Silk admitted. Relg appealed to Belgarath.
Is what he says true?
The sorcerer scratched thoughtfully at his beard.
He doesn't seem to have left out very much,
he replied.
The word religion means different things to different people, Relg. It depends on the nature of one's god. You ought to try to get that sorted out in your mind. It might make some of the things you'll have to do a bit easier.
Belgarath scratches his beard. I think we've just about exhausted the possibilities of this conversation, Father, Aunt Pole suggested, and we have a long way to go.
Right,
he agreed, getting to his feet. They rode down through the arid jumble of rock and scrubby bushes that spread across the western frontier of the land of the Thulls. The continual wind that swept up across the escarpment was bitterly cold. I feel like that flickering is happening frequently now. was bitterly cold, though there were only a few patches of thin snow lying beneath the somber gray sky. Relg's eyes adjusted to the subdued light, and the clouds appeared to quiet the panic the open sky had caused him. But this was obviously a difficult time for him. The world here above ground was alien, and everything he encountered seemed to shatter his preconceptions. It was also a time of personal religious turmoil, and the crisis goaded him into peculiar fluctuations of speech and action. At one moment, he would sanctimoniously denounce the sinful wickedness of others, his face set in a stern expression of righteousness, and in the next, he would be writhing in an agony of self-loathing, confessing his sin and guilt in an endless, repetitious litany to any who would listen. His pale face and huge, dark eyes, framed by the hood of his leaf mail shirt, contorted in the tumult of his emotions. Once again, the others, even patient, good-hearted Dernick, drew away from him, leaving him entirely to Garion. Relg stopped often for prayers and obscure little rituals that always seemed to involve a great deal of groveling in the dirt.
It's going to take us all year to get to Rakthol at this rate,
Barak rumbled sourly on one such occasion, glaring with open dislike at the ranting fanatic kneeling in the sand beside the trail.
We need him,
Belgarath replied calmly.
And he needs this. We can live with it if we have to.
We're getting close to the northern edge of Cthulmurgos, Silk said, pointing ahead at a low range of hills. We won't be able to stop like this once we cross the border. We'll have to ride as hard as we can until we get to the south caravan route. The Murgos patrol extensively, and they disapprove of side trips. Once we get to the track, we'll be all right, but we don't want to be stopped before we get there. Will we not be questioned even on the caravan route, Prince Keldar? Mandaralin asked. Our company is oddly assorted, and Murgos are suspicious. They'll watch us, Silk admitted, but they won't interfere as long as we don't stray from the track. The treaty between Tar Urgas and Ran Borun guarantees freedom of travel along the caravan route, and no Murgo alive would be foolish enough to embarrass his king by violating it. Tar Urgas is very severe with people who embarrass him. They crossed into Cthulmurgos shortly after noon on a cold, murky day, and immediately pushed into a gallop. After about a league or so, Relg began to pull in his horse.
Not now, Relg,
Belgarath told him sharply.
Later. But Ul's a patient god. He'll wait. Keep going.
They galloped on across the high, barren plain toward the caravan route, their cloaks streaming behind them in the biting wind. It was mid-afternoon when they reached the track and reined in. Look at that, they actually made it to the caravan route without an encounter. They got from point A to point B without a random encounter. That's rare. The South Caravan route was not precisely a road, but centuries of travel had clearly marked its course. Silk looked around with satisfaction. Made it, he said. Now we become honest merchants again, and no Murgo in the world is going to interfere with us. He turned his horse eastward then, and led the way with a great show of confidence. He squared his shoulders, seeming to puff himself up with a kind of busy self-importance. And Garion knew that he was making mental preparations involved in assuming a new role. Feel like we're getting close to that square. Although this is a little more of bard territory, I guess. When they encountered the well-guarded pack train of a Tolnedran merchant moving west, Silk had made his transition, and he greeted the merchant with the easy camaraderie of a man of trade. "Good day, Grand High Merchant," he said to the Tolnedran, noting the other's marks of rank. Grand High Merchant. Jeez, this reminds me of Deep Space Nine a little. "If you can spare a moment, I thought we might exchange information about the trail. You've come from the east, and I've just come over the route to the west of here. An exchange might prove mutually beneficial." Tolnedrans are Ferengi confirmed.
"Excellent idea,"
the Tolnedran agreed. The Grand High Merchant was a stocky man with a high forehead and wore a fur-lined cloak pulled tightly about him to ward off the icy wind. "My name is Ambar," Silk said, "from Kotu." Ambar of Kotu has returned. The Tolnedran nodded in polite acknowledgement.
"Calvor,"
he introduced himself,
"of Tol Horb. You've picked a hard season for the journey east, Ambar."
"Necessity," Silk said. "My funds are limited, and the cost of winter lodgings in Tol Honeth would have devoured what little I have left."
"The Honeths are rapacious,"
Calvor concurred.
"Is Ranborun still alive?"
"He was when I left." Calvor made a face.
"And the squabble over the succession goes on?"
Silk laughed. "Oh, yes."
Is that swine Cador from Tol Vordu still dominant?"
"Cador fell upon hard times, I understand. I heard that he made an attempt on the life of Princess Sinedra. I imagine that the Emperor's going to take steps to remove him from the race."
"What splendid news!"
Calvor said, his face brightening. "How's the trail to the east?" Silk asked.
"There's not much snow,"
Calvor told him.
"Of course, there never is in Cthul Margos. It's a very dry kingdom. It's cold, though. It's bitter in the passes. What about the mountains in eastern Tolnedra?"
"It was snowing when we came through."
"I was afraid of that,"
Calvor said with a gloomy look. "You probably should have waited until spring, Calvor. The worst part of the trip's still ahead of you."
"I had to get out of Rakgoska."
Calvor looked around almost as if expecting to see someone listening.
You're headed toward trouble, Ambar," he said seriously.
"Oh?"
"This is not the time to go to Rakgoska. The Murgos have gone insane there."
"Insane?" Silk said with alarm.
"There's no other explanation. They're arresting honest merchants on the flimsiest charges you ever heard of, and everyone from the West is followed constantly. It's certainly not the time to take a lady to that place."
"My sister," Silk replied, glancing at Aunt Pole. "She's invested in my venture, but she doesn't trust me. She insisted on coming along to make sure I don't cheat her."
"I'd stay out of Rakgoska,"
Calvor advised. "I'm committed now," Silk said helplessly. "I don't have any other choice, do I?"
I'll tell you quite honestly, Ambar, it's as much as a man's life is worth to go to Rakgoska just now. A good merchant I know was actually accused of violating the women's quarters in a Murgo household.
Well, I suppose that happens sometimes. Murgo women are reputed to be very handsome.
Ambar,
Calvor said with a pained expression.
The man was 73 years old.
His sons can be proud of his vitality, then, Silk laughed. What happened to him?
He was condemned and impaled,
Calvor said with a shudder.
The soldiers rounded us all up and made us watch. It was ghastly.
Silk frowned. There's no chance that the charges were true?
73 years old, Ambar,
Calvor repeated.
The charges were obviously false. If I didn't know better, I'd guess that Tar Urgas is trying to drive all Western merchants out of Thul Murgos. Rakgoska simply isn't safe for us anymore.
Belgarath is kind of the exception. Silk grimaced. Who can ever say what Tar Urgas is thinking?
He profits from every transaction in Rakgoska. He'd have to be insane to drive us out deliberately.
I've met Tar Urgas, Silk said grimly. Sanity's not one of his major failings. He looked around with a kind of desperation on his face. Calvor, I've invested everything I own and everything I can borrow in this venture. If I turn back now, I'll be ruined.
You could turn north after you get through the mountains,
Calvor suggested.
Cross the river into Mishrak Ak Thul and go to Thul Mardu.
Silk made a face. I hate dealing with Thulls.
There's another possibility,
the Tolnedran said.
You know where the halfway point between Tol Honeth and Rakgoska is?
Silk nodded.
There's always been a Murgo resupply station there. Food, spare horses, other necessities.
That's on our map, the resupply station. Although it's very far west, it's way over in the northwest corner. All the active 73-year-old men reading the series are suddenly offended. To be fair, we're talking about 73-year-old in this world. I don't think they've got the same level of health care.
Anyway, since the troubles in Rakgoska, a few enterprising Murgos have come out there and are buying whole caravan loads, horses and all. Their prices aren't as attractive as the prices in Rakgoska, but it's a chance for some profit, and you don't have to put yourself in danger to make it.
But that way you have no goods for the return journey, Silk objected. Half the profit's lost if you come back with nothing to sell in Tol Honeth.
You'd have your life, Ambar,
Calvor said pointedly. He looked around again nervously, as if expecting to be arrested.
I'm not coming back to Thul Murgos,
he declared in a firm voice.
I'm as willing as any man to take risks for a good profit, but all the gold in the world isn't worth another trip to Rakgoska.
How far is it to the halfway point? Silk asked, seemingly troubled.
I've ridden for 3 days since I left there,
Calvor replied.
Good luck, Ambar, whatever you decide.
He gathered up his reins.
I want to put a few more leagues behind me before I stop for the night. There may be snow in the Tolnedron Mountains, but at least I'll be out of Cthul Murgos, and out from under the fist of Tor Urgas.
He nodded briefly and moved off to the west at a fast trot, with his guards and his pack train following after him. And that's the end of chapter 20. Definitely going to stop there. It is 9 o'clock on the dot. How about that? That was an interesting couple of chapters. Oh boy. Relg. Oh, Relg. I am not unhappy to be out of... sorry, BBAB, I don't have very many commands set up. Also, Calvor had more lines there than I was expecting. Relg's fanaticism and just being a perv. Who expected Relg to be such a perv in thought? The temptations of women. Oh boy. A lot of Murgo cultural knowledge in that one. Yeah. Yeah, that whole explanation of Thullish society was pretty nasty, huh? First time you really have an opportunity to feel sorry for an Angarak. For the Thulls. That was pretty gross. I feel like Relg would be a men's rights activist in another universe. Relg's got a lot of character growth to get through if he wants to be halfway to a decent person, doesn't he? That's, I feel like, yeah, of all the characters that you were not supposed to like when they first got introduced, Relg, ugh. Oh, so far he does not have very many points to recommend him by, huh? Ugh. Poor Garion. He at least has some opportunity for change. Yeah, that's one way to put it. He's so nasty that there's almost nowhere to go but up, right? Yep, Relga. Warmos has been in Garion's situation. With someone like Relg, I imagine you mean, not with Relg specifically. Garion's situation with Relg, I guess, was the whole thought. Yeah, I've been there too. Where, you know, you're polite enough to actually listen and respond nicely, and therefore the floodgates open. They're your responsibility now. The dwarf? I don't know if you mean Belden, but this world doesn't really have dwarfs otherwise. There's currently Belgrath, Polgara, Garion. Relg is, I guess, sort of dwarf-like. They lived underground. We have Barak. Hetar has taken a break to go send a message, basically. We've got Silk. It's probably Relg that you're thinking of, who's the religious fanatic that is from the Ulgo people living underground. So, yeah, he's and he was described as being quite stocky and muscular. But, so I guess they're as close to dwarfs as you're likely to encounter. Oh, no, yeah, that's Belden then. Yeah, that's Belden. He has, they've encountered him. In the Vale of Aldor, he stopped by and they had some cursing. And, yeah, That was not very long ago. That was pretty recent. That is in this book. Yeah, they encountered Belden. The eating stew out of the dirt. He gets given a plate of stew and he dumps it into the dirt and then starts shoveling fistfuls into his mouth. Belden, yeah. It is Belden. The second spelling there. Yeah, he's quite the character. Openly insulting Polgara. The only person, I think, really to actually insult Polgara. Even, like, Asherak didn't really insult Polgara. Farmos always pictures Relg being kind of gross and unpleasant looking. He's described as being really, like, overly muscular, but not necessarily ugly otherwise. But Belden, yeah, Belden is called a dwarf, in the sort of has dwarfism sort of way. You picture him like the little mole dude from Atlantis. Belden is an interesting character. Intentionally keeps himself filthy. Well, overly muscular is kind of scary. Yeah, the Ulgos sound very odd, because they're very pale, because they never are exposed to sunlight. So they're very pale, they have big dark eyes, they've got pale hair even, and they just live underground and are all beefy. They're definitely an odd sounding people. Spend most of their time in religious observances. I think he was described as being short-ish. I think most of the Ulgos are described as being fairly short. I don't remember specifically, but I think that was the case. Let's see. Here it is. Like all Ulgos, he was short, but his arms and shoulders were so massively developed that he seemed almost deformed. His colorless hair was tangled and unkempt, he wore a hooded leather smock stained and smeared with some kind of mud, and his large black eyes burned with fanaticism. So, he's short, so muscly as to almost appear deformed, and he doesn't keep himself very clean. No, that was Relg I was describing. No, Belden is not actually a dwarf race. That part was, it's only briefly described, but Polgara says that he was essentially kicked out from his people because he was so deformed. And so he's referred to as a dwarf in the same way that some people get referred to as dwarfs, right? Whether or not that's the language they prefer to use. But let's see. I was actually almost at that part of this description. He's a very gentle person. This was Aunt Pole speaking. He's a very gentle person, really, but people don't expect that coming from him. When he was a child, his people drove him out because he was so deformed and hideous. When he finally came to the Vale, our master saw past the ugliness to the beauty of his mind. That's describing Belden. I don't think there are actually, like, a dwarfish people in this world. Just like I don't think there are any elves or anything like that. I don't think. Pharma says there aren't many actual descriptions of non-humans, humanoid, but also sentient peoples. No, I mean, there's the dryads. So they're about as close as you'd get, but even they are still kind of referred to as monsters. You know, they're technically monsters, even if they look like people and more or less act like people. But other than them, I mean, we had the Eldrikin, which was more like a troll or an ogre, but it was capable of speech. Grull. But yeah, those are the only two humanoid but not human, but still capable of speech peoples that I can think of that we've encountered. Belden, I am pretty sure. I guess I'm not positive about this, but I'm pretty sure Belden is technically human. Just small and deformed and ugly and mean, and or at least acts mean and doesn't take care of himself because he kind of has the whole self-loathing thing going on. But I think Belden is technically human. They call him dwarf, but I think that's more in the way that, like I said, some people get called dwarfs, even if that's not, you know, whether or not that is correct language usage at this point. But has dwarfism. Yeah, I think that that's what it is. Again, it's possible I'm wrong. I don't think that there's that, like, I don't think there's really any other, I don't think they go into it any more than that bit I just read. Yeah. Anyways, this was fun. For those who are new, Mark Rides, thank you for joining us today. A few others in there. I'm here every Wednesday and Friday, with pretty few exceptions. I usually start at about 7 p.m., or I say about, but at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So that's my schedule. Wednesdays and Fridays, 7 o'clock PST. So, you know, convert that to wherever you live. But yeah, I'm going to raid out to Slightly Stupid Bear. He's playing some Deep Rock Galactic. Speaking of dwarves, that's a game, if you aren't aware, about dwarves in space mining precious metals and things and fighting space bugs. Yeah, so I'm going to start that up. So, you know, even if you're not going to stick around, I'm sure Bear would appreciate it if you went and said hi to him. See what he's doing. He's a real nice guy. It's been about 26 years. I could definitely, like, they call him a dwarf. So, and they don't talk much about it beyond that. So honestly, if you wanted to think of him as a dwarf, I wouldn't really argue that much. It's just my thought is that I don't think he technically is, because otherwise I don't think you ever encounter a dwarf, an actual dwarf, in these books. But it's never actually really mentioned which people Belden is from. So, yeah. You know, feel free to join us next week. You've read it before, so you can pick up where we're at. And we'll continue into Cthulmurgos. See what happens there. But yeah, I hope everybody has a lovely weekend. And I'll be back here next week on Wednesday. But I've got some cleaning to do and some dinner to eat, and got to get ready for a house showing tomorrow. Our realtor is going to take an attempt at selling the place. So hopefully I'll have some good news next week. Maybe the place will actually have sold. Yeah. All right. Go say hi to Slightly Stupid Bear. He will be very happy to see you. And yeah, have a good night, everybody. Bye. And whip. And raid now.